The first time my daughter told me my husband was cheating, I didn't slap her. I didn't scream. I didn't even ask her for proof. I simply stared at the photograph she had placed on my kitchen table and felt something inside me go completely still. There was my husband, Daniel, standing outside a hotel in downtown Chicago, and beside him was a woman I'd never seen before. His hand was resting on the small of her back. My daughter, Lauren, stood across from me with tears in her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "you have to leave Dad." I remember looking at that photograph for a long time. Then I looked at my daughter, and I asked the question that would eventually change everything. "How long have you known?" Lauren hesitated. "Long enough. At the time, I thought she was protecting me from a husband's betrayal. I had no idea she was protecting herself. And by the time I discovered the truth, the woman in that photograph would be the least frightening part of the story. My name is Rebecca Hayes. I was 58 years old when my daughter told me my husband was having an affair. I had been married to Daniel for 27 years. 27 years is long enough to stop remembering where one person ends and the other begins. We had raised 2 children together. Lauren was our oldest. Our son, Matthew, was 24 and living in Colorado. Daniel and I had built our life slowly. There were no dramatic beginnings, no whirlwind romance. We met at a charity dinner in Chicago when I was 30, and Daniel was 32. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. He was the one sitting quietly near the window, listening to everyone else. I liked that about him. He made me feel safe. And for most of our marriage, I believed that was exactly what I had. Safety, trust, a home. Then, 3 weeks before our 27th anniversary, my daughter walked into my kitchen carrying a photograph. And suddenly everything I thought I knew about my marriage became a question. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happened next wasn't simply the story of a cheating husband. It was the story of how easily the people closest to us can manipulate the truth when they know exactly what we want to believe. For the first few minutes after Lauren showed me the photograph, neither of us spoke. I kept looking at Daniel's face. He was wearing the navy coat I had bought him for Christmas. The woman beside him was younger than me. Maybe in her 40s. Dark hair, cream-colored coat. And Daniel was smiling. That was what hurt most. Not the hotel. Not even the woman. His smile. It was the same relaxed smile he used at home when I made him coffee on Sunday mornings. I finally looked up. "Who is she?" Lauren shook her head. "I don't know her name." That should have been the first thing that bothered me. But grief doesn't always arrive with logic. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling that takes over every reasonable thought you have. "How did you get this?" "I followed Dad." I stared at her. "You followed your father?" "I had to." "Why?" Lauren sat down. Her hands were shaking. "Because something has been wrong with him for months." She told me Daniel had been coming home late. He had started taking phone calls outside. He had changed the password on his phone. He had opened a second bank account. And twice, Lauren said, she had seen him meeting the same woman. Then she looked directly into my eyes. "Mom, I think Dad is planning to leave you." That sentence broke something inside me. Not because I believed it, because a part of me had already noticed the changes. The late nights, the unexplained trips, the way Daniel sometimes stopped talking when I entered a room. I had simply chosen not to interpret them. Lauren knew that. She knew exactly where my doubts lived. And she knew how to turn those doubts into fear. I asked her one more question. "Does Dad know you know?" "No." "Are you sure?" She nodded. Then she said something I would remember for years. "Mom, if you confront him now, he'll lie." I asked why. She said, "Because that's what people do when they're protecting something." At the time, I thought she meant another woman. I didn't understand that she was talking about herself. That night, Daniel came home at 8:47. He kissed my forehead, asked whether I'd eaten. Then he went upstairs. I watched him disappear around the corner. For 27 years, that man had been my husband. That night, for the first time, he looked like a stranger I had invited into my house. I didn't confront him. Instead, I waited. And the next morning, I started looking. I didn't have to search very hard. Daniel had never been careless with money, but he had recently become careless with records. There was a bank statement on his desk. I saw a transfer for $8,500. The recipient was a name I didn't recognize. Vanessa Cole. I wrote the name down. Then I found another payment. $4,000. Then another. $6,500. All going to Vanessa Cole. I sat there staring at the numbers. My hands became cold. This wasn't an affair. This looked like something much larger. When Daniel came home that evening, I almost asked him, but I remembered Lauren's warning. Don't confront him. He'll lie. So I waited another day. Then another. During that time, Daniel became unusually affectionate. He brought me flowers. He asked me to take a weekend trip with him. He started talking about our anniversary. It should have made me happy. Instead, every kind gesture felt suspicious. On Thursday evening, he told me he had a late meeting downtown. I waited 20 minutes. Then, I followed him. I had never followed my husband anywhere in my life. But that night, I sat behind the wheel of my car and watched him drive toward downtown Chicago. He stopped outside the same hotel from Lauren's photograph. The Meridian. I parked several spaces away. Daniel walked inside. 10 minutes later, the woman from the photograph came out. Vanessa. I almost got out of my car. Instead, I watched. Daniel came outside. Vanessa said something. Daniel shook his head. Then she handed him an envelope. He put it inside his coat. They didn't kiss. They didn't hug. They didn't behave like lovers. But at that moment, I wasn't thinking clearly enough to care. I drove home before Daniel did. When he walked through the door later that night, I was sitting on the couch. He smiled. You're still awake? I looked at him. How was your meeting? He paused. Only for a second. But I saw it. Fine. What did you discuss? Work. He walked past me. I knew he was lying. And that was the first time in 27 years that I realized my husband could look directly into my eyes and lie without blinking. The next morning, I called Vanessa Cole. She answered on the fourth ring. Hello? I said her name. Silence. Then she asked, Who is this? I'm Daniel Hayes' wife. Another silence. Longer this time. Finally, Vanessa said, You shouldn't have called me. I felt my stomach tighten. Are you having an affair with my husband? No. The answer came too quickly. I almost laughed. Then why is my husband paying you thousands of dollars? Vanessa breathed out slowly. Mrs. Hayes, your husband has been trying to protect someone. Who? She didn't answer. Who? Still nothing. Then Vanessa said, Ask your daughter, and hung up. I sat there holding my phone. Ask your daughter. I called Lauren immediately. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I called Daniel. He answered. Hey, Rebecca. I said, Who is Vanessa Cole? The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. 4 seconds can be a very long time when you're waiting for your husband to tell you the truth. Finally, he said, Where did you hear that name? I closed my eyes. You didn't answer my question. Rebecca, this isn't what you think. I laughed. It was a bitter little laugh. That's what everyone says when it is exactly what I think. Please, trust me. Trust you? My voice cracked. Daniel, you've been sending this woman thousands of dollars. You've been meeting her at hotels. You've been lying to me. He said nothing. Then he said, I haven't been cheating on you. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I asked, Then what have you been doing? He said, I can't tell you yet. That answer destroyed whatever was left of my trust. Yet? Rebecca. No. I hung up. That evening, Lauren came to my house. She looked terrified. I didn't tell her what Vanessa had said. Instead, I asked a simple question. Do you know Vanessa Cole? Lauren's face changed. Just slightly. But enough. No. I watched her. You're sure? Yes. She looked away. And that was when I knew my daughter was lying. My own daughter. The girl I had carried. The girl whose first steps I had recorded. The girl who had once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms because she was afraid of the lightning. She was lying to me. I asked again. Lauren, do you know Vanessa? No. I nodded. Then I said, your father told me everything. Her eyes widened. I hadn't actually said that. I had only wanted to see her reaction. And it was enough. She stood up immediately. What did he tell you? There it was. The answer. Lauren knew far more than she had told me. I didn't confront her further. I simply said I was tired. She left. The moment the door closed, I called Daniel. He answered immediately. Rebecca? Lauren knows. He went silent. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. I know. I sat down. You know? She was never supposed to find out. Find out what? He didn't answer. Daniel, what have you been hiding from me? He finally said, I need you to do something. What? Don't sell the house. I stared at the walls around me. What are you talking about? Whatever happens next, don't sign anything. Why? Because that's what they're waiting for. Who? He didn't answer. Then the call ended. I sat alone in my living room. And for the first time, I understood that the affair might never have been the real story. Someone was waiting for me to sell my house. Someone wanted me to sign something. And somehow, my daughter was involved. The next morning, I searched through the house for anything that might explain what Daniel meant. I found an old filing cabinet in the basement. Inside were mortgage papers, tax records, insurance documents, and copies of our original property agreement. Then I found something I had never seen before. A trust document. The property wasn't simply owned by Daniel and me. There was a family trust attached to it. And the beneficiary was not Lauren. It was Matthew, our son. I read the document twice. Then a third time. I called the attorney listed at the bottom. His name was Charles Bennett. He asked me to come to his office. I went that afternoon. Charles was an older man with silver hair and the exhausted expression of someone who had spent decades watching families destroy themselves over money. When I told him I had found the trust document, he didn't look surprised. That scared me. You knew about this. He folded his hands. Yes. How long? 27 years. I felt dizzy. 27? He nodded. Your mother established the trust before her death. My mother never told me. She told your husband. I couldn't breathe. Daniel knew? Yes. Why didn't he tell me? Charles looked at me for a long moment. Because he promised your mother he wouldn't. I stared at him. My mother made my husband promise to keep something from me? She believed she was protecting you. From what? Charles didn't answer immediately. Then he opened a file. Rebecca, before I tell you anything else, you need to understand something. He pushed a document toward me. Your family had financial problems long before you knew about them. I looked down. My mother's name was on the document. So was my father's. And beneath them was another name. Lauren Hayes. My daughter's name. I looked up. What does my daughter have to do with this? Charles said quietly. Everything. The truth came out in pieces. Years earlier, when Lauren was 23, she had gotten involved with a man named Eric Wallace. Eric had been running a small investment company. Lauren believed she was helping him expand it. But the company was a fraud. Money disappeared. Clients lost everything. Lauren had not created the scheme, but she had helped move money through accounts in her name. When Daniel discovered what had happened, he confronted her. Lauren begged him not to tell me. She said she was terrified. She said she would fix everything. Daniel believed her. He used his own savings to repay some of the money. Then he discovered something worse. Lauren had used a portion of the family property as collateral without our knowledge. That was why the trust existed. My mother had anticipated that one day someone might try to take the property from the family. She had placed it under legal protection. And she had told Daniel that if Lauren ever tried to access it, he was to stop her. But Daniel never told me. Instead, he spent years quietly cleaning up Lauren's mistakes. Vanessa Cole was connected to the original fraud. She had been one of the people who helped recover the missing money. Daniel had been paying her because she possessed evidence that could have sent Lauren to prison. I sat in Charles's office feeling as though my entire life had been rewritten. My husband had lied. My daughter had lied. And my mother had left behind a secret that had controlled my marriage for 27 years. But there was still one thing I didn't understand. Why had Lauren told me Daniel was cheating? Charles looked at me. Because she needed you to distrust him. Why? Because Daniel had recently discovered that she was trying to access the property again. My heart sank. She was? Charles nodded. She had contacted the bank. Why? Debt. I closed my eyes. How much? Charles gave me a number. It was enough to make me physically sick. Lauren owed more money than I had ever imagined. Credit cards, private loans, business debts, and one very large debt to someone Charles refused to identify without a court order. Suddenly, the strange behavior made sense. The hotel, the money, the secret meetings. Vanessa. Daniel hadn't been seeing another woman. He had been trying to stop our daughter from destroying herself. But that didn't make Daniel innocent. Because he had lied to me for 27 years. I went home that evening. Daniel was waiting. He knew. One look at my face and he knew. You went to Charles. I nodded. Tell me everything. He sat down. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my husband's eyes. He told me about Lauren, about Eric, about the money, about Vanessa, about the trust. And then he told me something I wasn't prepared for. He said, "Your mother made me promise that if Lauren ever came after the property, I would protect you and Matthew." I stared at him. Why me? Because she knew you would give everything you had to save your children. I looked away. He continued. She was afraid that if you knew Lauren was in trouble, you'd sacrifice your future to rescue her. He was right. That was exactly what I would have done. And somehow that made the betrayal hurt even more. Because everyone had known me so well that they had decided I couldn't be trusted with the truth. I asked Daniel one question. Did you ever love me? He looked shocked. Of course. Then why did you make decisions about my life without me? He didn't answer. I stood up. I could have forgiven a mistake. My voice shook. But you didn't make one mistake, Daniel. You made thousands of decisions for me. He lowered his head. I thought I was protecting you. No. I shook my head. You were protecting everyone except me. That night, I moved into the guest room. I didn't sleep. At 3:14 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. Mom, please don't believe Dad. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. He's hiding the worst part. I sat up. The worst part? I replied. What worst part? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, Lauren sent. Ask him what happened to Eric. My heart stopped. Eric. The man behind the original fraud. I thought he was simply someone who had disappeared after the scandal. The next morning, I asked Daniel. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, Eric is dead. I froze. What? Eric died 4 years ago. How? Car accident. I stared at him. Did you know? Yes. Did Vanessa know? Yes. Did Lauren know? He didn't answer. I already knew. She did. But then I noticed something else. The date of Eric's death. 4 years earlier. The same year Daniel had begun withdrawing large amounts of money. The same year he had become distant. The same year Lauren had started struggling financially. I asked Daniel, what really happened? He looked at me. I don't know. I didn't believe him. Not completely. So I called Vanessa. She agreed to meet me. We sat in a small cafe outside the city. Vanessa looked exhausted. She told me Eric's death had been ruled an accident. But before he died, he had contacted her. He said he was afraid. He claimed someone had been threatening him. Who? Vanessa looked at me. He never told me. Did you believe him? Yes. Why? Because he sent me something. She opened her purse. Then she placed a small flash drive on the table. My hands went cold. What is that? Something Eric gave me. What's on it? She looked at me. Proof. Proof of what? That Lauren wasn't the only person involved. I couldn't speak. There was someone else, Vanessa continued. Someone who had access to your family's finances. I stared at the drive. Who? Vanessa said. Your husband. I felt the room disappear around me. Daniel. Again. Always Daniel. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, but I couldn't. That evening I confronted him. I put the flash drive on the table. What's on this? He looked at it. His face went pale. Where did you get that? From Vanessa. He sat down. Rebecca, what did you do? He covered his face with his hands. And then he told me the truth. The flash drive contained records showing that Daniel had secretly transferred money into Eric's company years earlier. But there was a reason. Daniel had been investigating Eric. He had suspected the company was fraudulent. He had put money into it to trace where the money was going. And when he discovered Lauren's involvement, he tried to pull her out. But there was one transaction he couldn't explain. A large transfer from an account connected to the family trust. It had happened after Daniel had supposedly taken control of the situation. He swore he hadn't authorized it, which meant someone else had access. Someone who knew about the trust. Someone who knew the property existed. Someone who knew exactly how much money was protected. I asked, who? Daniel looked at me. I thought it was Lauren. But the transaction happened before Lauren knew about the trust. That sentence changed everything. If Lauren hadn't known, who had? I called Charles. He reviewed the transaction. Then he found something. The authorization wasn't Daniel's. It belonged to someone who had once been given temporary access to the family's financial records. My mother. But my mother had been dead for years. The signature had been forged, and the person who had access to her old documents was Lauren. I felt sick. My daughter hadn't discovered the trust recently. She had known about it much longer than she admitted. She had been planning around it, but there was still one missing piece. Why would she need Daniel to look guilty? Then I found it. A recording. It was on the same flash drive. Eric's voice. He was speaking to someone. At first, the recording was difficult to understand. Then I heard a woman's voice. Lauren. My daughter. She was talking to Eric. She was asking him about the money. She was angry. She said, "You promised me the debt would disappear." Eric replied, "It doesn't work that way." Lauren said, "Then I'll tell my father everything." Eric laughed. "You think your father doesn't already know?" The recording ended. I sat there crying. Not because I was surprised anymore, but because I finally understood. Lauren hadn't been trying to save me. She had been trying to control what I knew. She had turned me against Daniel because Daniel was the one person who could stop her. She had shown me the photograph because she knew I would believe an affair more easily than I would believe my own daughter was manipulating me. And Daniel had made the mistake of keeping his secret so long that, when the truth finally surfaced, he looked guilty of everything. But there was one final piece. The person Lauren had been trying to pay. The person behind her enormous debt. Charles eventually found the name. It wasn't Eric. It wasn't Vanessa. It wasn't a bank. It was a private lender. A man named Richard Cole, Vanessa's husband. And suddenly everything connected. Vanessa hadn't been Daniel's lover. She had been trying to recover money her husband had lost through Eric's company. Daniel had been paying her because he had promised to recover part of it. Lauren owed Richard money, and when she realized Daniel was getting close to the truth, she created the affair story. But she had underestimated one thing. Her father had kept records. And those records would eventually expose her. I thought the story was finally over. It wasn't. Because 2 weeks later, Charles called me. He said he had found something in my mother's original estate file. Something no one had noticed for 27 years. I went to his office. He opened a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother. It was addressed to me. Not Daniel. Me. Charles said my mother had instructed him to give it to me only if the trust was ever challenged. My hands trembled as I opened it. My mother's handwriting filled the page. She explained that she had known Lauren was impulsive. She knew I would protect my children at any cost. But there was another reason she had created the trust. She had discovered something about Daniel before I married him. Something I had never known. Daniel's father had once been involved in the same financial circle as my father. Our families had crossed paths years before we met. My mother had discovered that Daniel's family had lost a fortune through a fraudulent investment. She believed Daniel had spent years trying to rebuild what his family had lost. She was afraid that one day, someone would use my family's wealth to solve their own problems. So she made Daniel promise to protect me. Not from himself. From everyone, including our children. My mother wrote that she trusted Daniel because he was the only person she believed would choose my safety over money. At the bottom of the letter was one final sentence. It said, "Rebecca, if you are reading this, then the people you trusted most have finally forced you to choose between protecting them and protecting yourself." I cried for a long time, because my mother had been right. For 27 years, I had protected everyone. My husband, my daughter, my son, my family. But I had never protected myself. The legal battle that followed lasted nearly a year. Lauren eventually admitted what she had done. She claimed she never intended to hurt me. She said she only wanted to save herself. But that was the problem. She wanted to save herself by sacrificing me. Daniel and I separated. Not because I stopped loving him, but because love wasn't enough to rebuild a marriage that had been built around secrets. He asked me for another chance. I told him I didn't know. Maybe someday, maybe never. Matthew came home from Colorado. He was furious when he learned the truth. Not just at Lauren. At Daniel. At me. At everyone. He asked me why none of us had simply told him. I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was uncomfortable. We had spent years believing that keeping secrets was the same thing as protecting family. It wasn't. Sometimes a secret doesn't protect a family. Sometimes it simply delays the explosion. Lauren eventually left Chicago. I haven't spoken to her in months. People ask me whether I forgive her. I don't know. Forgiveness is complicated when the person who hurt you is someone you once carried in your arms. I don't hate her. But I no longer confuse love with access. She can be my daughter without being allowed to control my life. And Daniel? We still speak occasionally. 27 years doesn't disappear overnight. But the woman who married him at 30 was not the woman who sat across from him at 58. That woman believed trust meant never questioning the people she loved. I learned something different. Trust doesn't mean refusing to look. It means allowing someone the freedom to tell you the truth. And if they repeatedly choose silence, lies, and manipulation, eventually, the silence becomes its own answer. Looking back, the photograph Lauren gave me was never really evidence of an affair. It was bait. She needed me angry. And she needed me frightened. She needed me to see my husband as the enemy. And I did. For a while. But the greatest betrayal wasn't that my husband had secrets. It wasn't that my daughter manipulated me. It wasn't even that my mother had hidden the truth about our family. The greatest betrayal was realizing how easily I had been convinced that everyone else deserved protection from the truth except me. That was the part that took the longest to heal. Today, I still live in the house my mother fought to protect. But I changed one thing. I removed the locks from the basement filing cabinet. I put every document in one place. Every account. Every trust. Every legal paper. Everything. No more hidden drawers. No more secret passwords that only one person knows. No more decisions made for my own good. Because if I learned anything after 27 years of marriage, it is this. A family can survive the truth. It can survive financial problems. It can survive mistakes. It can even survive betrayal. But it becomes very difficult to survive when everyone decides that one person is the only person who doesn't deserve to know what is happening. My daughter thought she was saving herself. My husband thought he was saving me. My mother thought she was protecting our family. And somehow, all three of them forgot to ask me what I wanted. The day I finally understood that, I stopped asking who had betrayed me. And I started asking a different question. Why had I spent so many years believing that being loved meant being protected from the truth? I still don't have the perfect answer. But I know this now. If someone tells you they are hiding something because they love you, listen carefully. Sometimes they really are protecting you. And sometimes, they are protecting themselves from what you will do when you finally know the truth. My daughter told me my husband was cheating. She was right about one thing. My husband was hiding something. But the woman in that photograph was never his lover. She was a witness. The hotel was never a place for an affair. It was where secrets were being exchanged. The money wasn't for another woman. It was being used to clean up a mess my daughter had created. And the marriage I thought had been destroyed by infidelity had actually been slowly damaged by 27 years of people keeping secrets from me. The day I stopped believing their lies wasn't the day my family fell apart. It was the day I finally began putting myself back together.